Hello, everyone. It is November 9, 2024, and we are all the way up to episode 20 of the Three Body Problem, a podcast that does very little to kick the needle forward. But we do have amazing co-hosts checking in live from the corridors of power in Washington D.C. Juanito,
I don't think there's much power left in these corridors at this point. It's just being squeezed out. But hello, everybody.
welcome to the show, and checking in from Romania, our European correspondent and Magic Money expert, Costin Raju. How are you, my friend?
Doing great. Thank you. How are you?
Good, good. Dude, the podcast sets a lot of tongues wagging last week with our discussions on the Sophos thing and Juan railing about hackback. What was the feedback in your world? I took a lot of incoming with people with a lot of different opinions, but I think people are actually reaching out to us individually.
It was really interesting on my end, the amount of positive feedback from a lot of folks and a lot of concern about our perceived dwindling
Yeah. Dwindling
viewership.
relevance.
But it was what was interesting to me is the private sector folks were extremely encouraging. They had a lot of like very positive. It was like this feeling of, oh, you guys are saying things that needed to be said, which I appreciate because usually I feel like I'm just kind of flying off the handle. The govies I heard from did not seem as happy, but I think that they have bigger concerns right now. So yeah, I think we're kind of split down the middle as far as like how folks are feeling about all this commentary. But I think that serves a purpose, right? Like there is something to be said about these things hitting different notes with different sectors, and I think everyone's playing a critical role in what we're all doing, and it has to be different, right? Like if I know I kind of it sounded like I was kind of chewing Rob Joyce out yesterday and last episode, and I really wasn't as much as when we talk about this hackback stuff. I would love to see that difference of opinions between the private sector and the public sector treating itself as complementary rather than trying to get all of us to play in the same lane.
Costin, there's another side of the coin that we heard that I saw on Twitter, and I see you participating in some of the conversations there as well with red teamers, security researchers, basically warning each other against EDR software, like help people understand why that was a specific worry among folks like you who might be a specific target for an EDR researcher wanting to know exactly what Costin is up to.
Yeah, sure. So one thing I learned all these years working in the field is that the bad guys actually they read all the blog posts very carefully. They listen to the podcasts. They go to the conferences, and they learn from all that. They learn and they adapt their tactics, and they become way more careful when they understand exactly how we collect information on their attacks and how we collect samples, how we collect telemetry, what is, let's say, acceptable and what not. And this is, I think, what worried us from the beginning, that maybe too much information out there in the field can actually help the bad guys more than it can actually help the good guys. So my advice, my recommendation remains the same. Do build telemetry, improve the kind of statistics you receive from your products, and at the same time be mindful of the fact that maybe not just the bad guys, but the vulnerability
You're actually asking your
research,
peers
we are.
not to talk about what they're doing. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think Kosin's telling us to shut the fuck up.
I know I'm getting a very strong STFU vibe from Costin, and I'm wondering if he means what he said. I'm trying to understand. Can you be a little more clear there?
I don't think so, no. Not more clear, but maybe more subtle in the sense that there were people reaching out to me and saying, we fully support you, but we don't want to go even to bring even more attention to the topic. And at the same time, we don't want to like publicly stand up for what you're saying because we don't want to get canceled from conferences and so on. And I was like, what? But again, bottom line, what I say is do build better telemetry, to build better metadata, whatever collection and information, but be very mindful of the fact that the bad guys are reading all the blogs, And the next thing, they'll do the same in air-gapped networks or, I don't know, Faraday cages in case of mobile phones, or just simply just cancel or stop all the telemetry that you are receiving, since they are aware of how you actually research their exploitation attempts.
Interesting, dovetails nicely with Hexacon's release of Clem stock, Google Project Zero's Clem stock, about how Google uses internal data to detect watering hole attacks, how they analyze changes in website in real time, and like some of the really internal backbones of how they go about not necessarily setting traps, but figuring out where the anomalies are that allow Google Project Zero to be prominent among finding these 0 days. You're saying he shouldn't be having this talk because bad guys listen to it and bad guys can like help me understand what you're saying.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that I would do that kind of a talk when I already have, let's say, the next level of telemetry and statistics already deployed and available, which maybe allows me to kind of burn the old school methods and the old style methods. So that's me. That's what I would do personally. Now, I don't know if that is the case with Google and they already have better capabilities. Let's not forget that actually Google Chrome comes with the ESET engine built in, which is again something that very few people know and few people realize, that there's an antivirus engine running inside Chrome on Windows, that is. So maybe that's one of the reasons that they have already a new generation and they have way more capabilities and statistics coming from other sources that allows them to be
That
more
allows
open
you think
about
this is all old stuff he's
the old
talking
school.
about.
I
I
think so.
mean, we hope so.
I hope so.
Well, I would add a couple of different caveats to that. I think in the case of Clem's talk, which Greg Lesnowich shared with us yesterday, and I eagerly consumed Clem's talk immediately. Well, I think we're all big Clem fans. I think the entire industry is sort of enamored with Clem and how brilliant a researcher he is. I was actually really happy to see that talk. Like I'll admit, Kosin, I disagree. I respectfully disagree with the stance, and I realize that that maybe it's almost like a AV generational thing in a way. I know that we've kind of kept our mouths shut about how a lot of the telemetry works for good reason for many years. And there was good reason to do it. And these days, I'm not saying that there's less of a reason to do so, but I wonder if there are other forces at play that are more important to push back on than just hiding how we do what we do.
Are you being
In
cryptic on purpose? Because
No, no,
you're losing me.
so what I'll say is there was a reason that we didn't want to discuss the ways that we did that we collected telemetry, that we discovered bad stuff in the past, right? Like
Silent
if you
signatures as an example.
Yeah, silent signatures is a big example that nobody wanted to acknowledge that existed, though that is like an obvious part of how an AV has to work. Like if you don't want AVs without silent signatures, in part because you don't want AVs that don't test how good their detections are in situ before they set them live and they fuck up your whole environment. Similarly, well, there's a lot of different things like that that netted a lot of really valuable findings, and some of them were super dumb and simple, right? Like if you write a YAR rule for the way that you do little placeholders in your output, your debug output for exploits or for specific tools. Some people like to decorate their logging output in a certain way. If I put that out, that's a quick fix. That's a thing you'll get rid of immediately. If I don't say anything about it, I'm going to keep finding. And I mean, Kosin, this is more credit to you. I What was the name of Toropov, the exploit developer, when you
Yeah.
found the Silverlight
Silverlight
exploit,
thing. Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
There was a lot of that was coming from, hey, if we look at the way that he's publicly putting out exploits, and look at the way that some of the padding and whatnot is formatted, maybe we can find the new stuff. And like there are things that we keep secret because they're simple and they work and they would be very easy to change. Then there's things that we keep secret because people misunderstand what the import of them is and what the value of them is, and they get pissy about it, while at the same time we're alerting the attackers as to how to circumvent us. And I think those have all been really valid reasons up until this point. But look at the Clem talk, and I think the fact that Google allowed that talk and that had happened, I think says more about the importance of properly communicating what Project Zero is doing at a time when everyone, including us in our first episode here, came down on them for like messing with a counterterrorism operation. And you have people like, shout out to Dave Itel, who's been very outspoken about this in the past, who are just saying, well, that's just not, why are you coming down? Why are you like so focused on bringing this particular operation down? And if you listen to what Clem describes, the systems that Clem describes, they're not focusing on that operation in particular at all. It's just the way that you do waterhole monitoring, searching, identifying.
Don't say kernel implant. Just
don't say kernel. But no. Like, dude, with that stuff, right? Like Google, it was almost shameful that Google hadn't been finding stuff like that before. My understanding is like Clem and other folks came and fixed some bad heuristics and worked on some new things, and all of a sudden all this stuff just starts pouring out. That is not them focusing on Western ops. That is not them deciding that they want to fuck up this particular CT op. That is them developing a new system that just caches in ODAs from watering hole sites, and that means that the land has shifted under the feet of the attackers, and now you have to adapt to something new. So I think there's something important to lifting the veil a little bit and saying this is how this shit works. In part because, well, right now we rely on Google almost entirely to do that sort of cross-internet monitoring, and they're amazing at it, and they have a great team for it, but they don't necessarily have the same incentives or publication priorities that the rest of us do. So do we really want Google to be the only one? And in a world where tomorrow Google gets, broken up by an antitrust lawsuit, which it's not going to happen, or they, some executive decides that Project Zero isn't worth the money and they get rid of all of them, should the whole internet be singularly reliant on this one company to do this kind of defense, knowing that they could tomorrow decide that that's not worth their time? So I am all for understanding the techniques. I am for having some of this stuff out there, and I am for some of the policy discussions and overall discussions being informed by some of this, how some of this stuff works. So I agree as a researcher with you, Kostin, but like in the broader sense of things, I do kind of want to hear more of the conversation. Like I do want us to talk about it more openly, right?
He makes the point here that private actors are like incorporating techniques from public security research. Exploits are mirroring known in some of the NDA stuff. But two things that stand out from that talk, Kostin, I don't know if you want to just jump in on this, is TAG is anticipating a shift towards exploiting non-browser applications because browsers are becoming more secure. Are we talking along the lines of the Fortinet stuff, or are we talking along the lines of like messaging apps on iPhones?
Yeah, and probably iPhones, I guess, and built-in iPhone messengers like WhatsApp,
WeChat. I think he did single out WeChat as well.
Skype, even Signal. I remember an anecdote when I noticed that one of the contacts that I met at Blue Hat in Israel that was typically chatting by Signal, like he disappeared from Signal for a while. And I think we met again and I asked like, what's going on? He said, well, it's not a good moment to be on Signal. So I said, okay. So after a while, I see him back on Signal and I asked, hey, what's up? And he said, well, now it's good to be Signal.
Something got patched.
It's a better moment to be on Signal.
There's winds, yeah. Like some people know from which direction the wind is blowing. And just to get back to one of the points that we were discussing with Toropov, is that, for sure, people caught maybe 3 or 4 0 days afterwards, but I mean, that was it. from that moment on, nobody has ever seen any kind of Toropov 0 days anymore. Which to me it sounds either that one, maybe he changed all his exploits, so we don't know how to find them anymore, or
Stop
two,
giving you clues publicly.
yeah, or two, he got arrested. Like he got arrested and he's
His
gone.
exploits are being delivered directly to the source now.
That, or maybe I don't know, he's hauling coal or working in a coal mine or something.
Yeah,
I
another
think
thing from the Clem talk that stood out to me was the fact that sandboxes are not as robust a mitigation as we perhaps believe it is. And he's talking about these pack bypasses, bypassing things across browsers that are very, very difficult to fix, which suggests that there's a weaknesses in our sandboxing model that isn't really working and helping.
I think Google is in a very unique position in the industry, which is also quite different from companies like Sentinel-1 or McAfee or Trend or ESET or whatever. In the sense they have the browser, right, and they have the users they need to protect, but they also have many other telemetry sources. So let's say that they harden the browser, it's suddenly super safe, like nobody can exploit it anymore, and for them that's like that's mission accomplished. For the rest of the industry, there's never mission accomplished, because there's always going to be a new 0 day in Windows, a new 0 days in Safari, a new 0 day in Firefox, a new 0 day in the kernel, and so on and so on. So it never ends. So for them, maybe if they talk about these methods and actually, I don't know, the browser is suddenly more secure, that's success. Like there's no problem. Wonderful. Like if they don't find 0 days overnight anymore, that's maybe a good sign. It means that they managed to stop everything. So I think that, yeah, there's a lot of subtle differences between their position and the rest of the industry. But I would always be very mindful of the attackers being in the audience at conferences. So yeah, I
Oh,
typically ask like who in the audience wrote the 0 day, who in the audience sold one, like who in the audience sold one for bitcoins, and who in the audience used one to target the U.S. government.
and
And
then you
there's
look
like
at the back, you go, get them, right? And then swarm in and grab these folks.
Do you find
right.
yourself censoring yourself, Juan, when you're discussing these things publicly?
In what capacity? I mean, look at guys. I am perhaps the least buttoned up and censored out of any of us in a variety of ways, right? Like I'm convincing all of you to go to therapy and take your meds and also to talk about threat intel secrets and be open about attribution and all that stuff. So I think that that makes a lot of people who are more buttoned up think that I'm just kind of flying off the handle. But frankly, like I do think that um, we as an industry have had a tendency to keep secrets by default. And there was and I think that's kind of come from, well, just how many people came out of the intelligence community, how many people will also see the value of leveraging what seems like an innocuous mistake or a stupid little thing and helping to protect people, helping to save lives, helping to whatever. So there is a value to keeping the secrets. I just think that we default to keeping secrets in a way that harms our industry sometimes, harms our ability to perform, harms the value proposition of what we do. So I am trying to shake that up a little bit, and that's not. It's not always a perfectly calculated thing. Sometimes I'll say something and someone will be like, "Hey man, please shut the fuck up. You're going to mess this important thing up. There's a good reason why you shouldn't." And then sometimes you say something and people go, "You shouldn't have said that, but thank you. It actually allowed me to argue with my executives and it changed this, that, and the other."
Right.
So I'm trying to find that sweet spot. When it comes to the attacker side, I just like anybody else have kept back how we've detected certain things or how we found certain things. When I think uh, primarily when it's the only way we're tracking something, right? To Kostin's earlier point, we hope that Clem said this because he's already got the next best
Something new,
thing.
yeah.
So in that sense, you're kind of trying to bring folks along, but you don't want to show your hand entirely. I will also point out to the point Clem said, and you highlighted, Ryan, that the attackers, the 0 day developers, the exploit developers are learning from public research. I do think the offensive side is much, much, much better than the defensive side at leveraging the stuff that makes it out into public information. Like you see those techniques You know, you're talking about somebody who's developing an O-Day chain that probably costs God knows how much money, and they've read up on all these techniques. They've watched all these talks. They found some esoteric thing that somebody dropped in a public blog 5 years ago or in a side conference here and there, and they leveraged it and they took it to its greatest conclusion. I don't think the defensive side is quite as good about having institutional memory about all the things that we discuss as good techniques, about rolling them all together. And you would be surprised if there was a world of perfect information among defenders, if we could all sit down and go, this is how our systems work internally, and this is what we track, and this is what we've automated. I think we would all be A, surprised, B, appalled at the disparities across all these different companies. And it's something I've discussed before, since we're talking about Google so much. Like, I could talk about Google for 2 episodes in and of itself, but like, one of the reasons that I used to come down on Google so much was it's an embarrassment of riches. Like, the capabilities, the databasing, the power, the big data scale, the internal systems, and all the signatures
You
and all
want
the
more.
stuff. Well, if we measured the contributions of a company relative to its visibility, automation, and resources, then what Google was putting out for many years was paltry and
Not enough. I
unacceptably
agree.
small, right? Like, it was the output they were putting out is what you would expect from like a small security company that's just trying to play ball, guys. I'm here. I found 6 spam emails. Notice me, senpai, right? Like, but for Google, that was like it was nonsense. And I think it was largely like a cultural thing, and some changes have happened.
And
Changes
they
are
spent
happening.
billions of dollars to buy Mandiant, so that's fixed because Mandiant
Well,
will actually.
you brought Mandiant as like an Intel thing. I don't know if that means you're leveraging the same
Their
tooling
documentation
on
has
that
improved. I
side.
mean, their public documentation of things have improved tremendously. I think the Mandiant, my Costin says their attribution is the best in the industry, right?
Well, uh, I think Mandiant is great, and they've brought a lot to bear, and we're seeing more of an appetite to publish. And I hope that Mandiant keeps doing well. I don't know how Mandiant is gonna keep working, right? Like, Kevin Mandia is out of the picture, and now you're just subject to a million reorgs and all this other bullshit. So I don't know how long people are gonna stick around for it. Like, I
It's called Google
personally,
Cloud Intelligence, by the way.
I can't keep track. GTI, whatever. But just to kind of button on that thing, like, I don't know how long that Mandiant is gonna be able to survive under that culture anymore. Um, Particularly on the human side of it, the people who are great analysts, because Google doesn't have a good culture of maintaining talent. You either like praise Jeff Dean and keep him around forever and make a million positions for him to be happy, or you treat everyone like they're just an engineer that can be replaced with a Stanford grad and some training for 18 months. And that doesn't really play out with threat intel analysts. So I'll be very happy to just kind of be out here hiring right around the time that everybody's getting shoved out to the street. But I wonder when, sorry, to like really get back to this discussion on a massive diatribe. Uh, I wonder how much of it is the Google contribution versus the Mandiant contribution these days, right? Project Zero, obviously, amazing, top
Yeah.
notch. The Mandiant guys still doing what they do, amazing stuff. How much of it is Tag getting to just put their stuff forward? How much of it is this visibility just being leveraged out there?
Yeah, I don't want to get too inside baseball with some of that stuff, but I do want to give a shout out to Sophos for starting this conversation. I mean, we got a full podcast out of it last week, and now it's actually opened up. It's actually provided an opening for people to come forward and talk about capabilities, what the expectations are, what we are doing, what we're not doing. And a story that slipped up by me last week is this Palo Alto publishing on an EDR bypass extortion attempt that they thwarted. And part of that was they had access to rogue systems. That's a quote, a direct quote. Connectivity between this virtual system and the network inadvertently gave us Palo Alto, a certain level of access to the rogue systems. Sounds very much like the controversial hacking back. Costin, you read this report.
Oh,
I did, and I wasn't sure I read it like the right way the first time, so I had to read it
So you read it
again.
twice. What
I
was your
remember,
takeaway after this third reading?
I told you, like, hey, this is an interesting report. Maybe I didn't read it right. Um, I thought it was interesting. Again, it seems to me that more and more people are talking publicly about capabilities, about their ability to lift files. I don't know, from attacker systems and so on. Um, I think that I do remember some similar cases. Maybe 8 9 years ago, maybe a bit more, when one company, for instance, they were showing screenshots from the attacker systems, and so uh, kind of screenshots from them deploying web shells on some of the attacker servers or leveraging web shells, which I know personally that it led the attackers to immediately close all the gaps. So it was like the end for everyone who was leveraging those web shells, not me, others, my friends, to see what the attackers are up to. Uh, so here I think it's quite interesting. Maybe it's a trend. I don't know. We are living at times of great changes, as you have seen last week. There's big changes all over the world, and this may be just a part of these changes with more transparency, and
Can I
people just not holding back.
can conspiracy Ryan have a word?
Of
No.
course,
Yeah, of course.
please.
A direct question to you, Costin. Have you ever done this stuff?
What's up?
This kind of like advanced telemetry collection, business intelligence tools. Like, I mean, how do you in your head process
Mm.
whether there's a line and is there a line to cross? I mean, let's have an honest conversation.
Do you know the Avengers, like the Avengers Endgame? No, yes,
No.
you don't know,
Really, you
right?
haven't
You're
watched
going to
any
try and
Marvel?
not answer my question?
No. I just wanted to give you a straight
An
answer,
analogy?
which is I'm Groot.
That's
What
it.
does that mean for the three of us that have never watched it?
You need to watch it to understand.
Juanito, is there a line that
no,
you guys
listen.
are constantly?
Give me just one single half a minute to say something, which is that I remember that back in the days at some conference, it was myself and a couple of others looking at our respective telemetries for the same thing, essentially. And we're like people from different, let's say, sides of the industry having different kinds of telemetry. And then I just realized that I was like the one with the least telemetry, because like everyone else was just lifting whatever they wanted, like everything. I was like, and I was like, what? In my case, if that file is not an executable, I cannot get a copy. If that file doesn't exist on more than 3 machines, like on the internet, I cannot get a copy, and so on and so on. They were like, and everyone was like, huh, really? Like you have all these limitations? How do you do like all those big discoveries? How did you do all those magic reports? And I was like, yeah, I have no idea either. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
So there is a threshold. There's a threshold that would stop you from going that extra line. Juan, walk me through your thinking.
I think this is not a simple question.
I know it's not, and this is why I asked if we can have an honest conversation about capabilities.
Yeah.
And the threshold for getting to the line, crossing the line in some cases, maybe not crossing the line, getting legal involved. Help us understand the thinking.
Well, so legal is involved the entire way in any of these companies, and the issue here is not what is possible, right? Like I think to a different point, Rob Joyce has been making on Twitter, mostly around the Kaspersky thing, but really when it comes to like
All is possible.
all is possible, right? Like you're installing the software that has a great deal of power. It's dug in really low into your system. It can do a whole lot of things. So the trust relationship is there's no way out of that, right? Like you're getting a thing, and the whole point of it is it's to help you monitor systems within certain parameters, and that entails having a great deal of visibility. I say legal is involved from the beginning because just in the drafting of those agreements and the use of those capabilities, legal is going to have a hand pretty early on. And it's actually why I hope, and I know a lot of researchers have had to sit down with legal teams at different companies. Like I'll join a new company and then end up having to spend 2 weeks with legal, just being like, "Whoa, guys! Like whoever came up with this way of like looking at quote unquote privacy doesn't understand how the product works, doesn't understand how we do our work. So let's sit back down and let's reconsider it, because what you describe when people talk about this sort of overzealous thinking against their EDR is um, almost like limiting the ability to do any kind of, let's say, IR or digital forensics, or how are you going to handle a situation where you have an insider and you want to see X, Y, and Z? How do you handle situations where, and we've had this, where attackers create a virtual machine and install your product on it so that they can bypass other requirements within the network to be able to traverse, right? Like there's places that have said you can't join our VPN unless you have the same EDR product that all of our other computers have for compliance reasons, right? Like why are you in the VPN if you don't have it? So then the attackers, in order to function within that network, go and install the product inside of a virtual machine to be able to conduct an attack. Who the fuck are you protecting in that situation, right? Like the questions that come up, um, I think these are the moments where we clump together as an infosec industry without realizing that different portions of the industry have different priorities in mind. Like the researchers who are crying that like EDR is collecting stuff on your boxes while you're trying to find bypasses. Yes, fucking of course. You're trying. All you're doing is
It's my
spending your
job, right?
yeah. You're spending your time and energy violating my EULA to undermine the security of my product, in order to get what brownie points at a conference and publish that shit on GitHub. And now I have 17-year-olds using that to like fuck up companies. Fuck you. Of course I'm gonna go grab that POC. I'm gonna check my telemetry. I'm gonna do my best to protect my customers. Like I don't get the indignation of it. I understand that you're trying to be haha coy and cute about it, and we do similar shit with attackers, but the part where you go, you really should know your AV is doing this for you. You go, yes, I pay them to do that for me. I pay them to not allow somebody to hammer this product 4,000 times until they figure out how to break it, and then give that capability away for free to anybody else, or charge for it and let somebody do it in private.
So that's a threshold point.
I think that's definitely a threshold point. You know, when you're talking about lowering the defenses of the entire fleet, I think there's also the part where, frankly, the threshold is largely customer determined. I have companies that have looked at us and said, give me the paperwork for whatever I need to sign for your team to do whatever they need to do to defend this network. Well, thank you. That's the fucking dream. I have license from the customer, the one person that I have to protect and whose privacy I need to be mindful of. Now, get the fuck out of my way. I'm going to go find wherever the hell is in there. Like, that is, at the end of the day, the bigger companies hide behind privacy to not take on security responsibilities. And the one thing that's missing is, well, have you asked people if they're cool with it? Like, if someone put a pop-up in Gmail that said, we're gonna let you know when somebody tries to hack you, and also, bro, like, if you want, here's like every copy of the spam emails and what team was behind it and some of the telemetry at all, like, do you want that? Yes or no? Like, why is that not an option, right?
Let me ask a question, and perhaps it's not a conspiracy riot question, but I'll ask it anyway because it popped up when you say, of course we're doing this. Is it appropriate, in your mind, Costin, for Microsoft to have a Windows Defender plus for a subset of people?
Oh, what do you mean for a subset of people?
Like everyone gets Windows Defender, but if you're Costin Ryu, you get kind of a Windows Defender plus that looks at your thingies. I don't mean to make it funny. I'm just curious if you think that's appropriate, considering what Juan just described as a threshold point.
You get special treatment and shit? Like, you're getting a...
Do you think it's appropriate for EDR vendors to give people special treatment?
You see, there's, by the way, there's a very subtle difference here between EDR, which is maybe, let's say, enterprise-oriented software, and free AV, which is, I think, Windows the other Defender side of the coin. Yeah, that's Windows Defender. And there's like a huge difference between how these things are licensed and what people agree to and what not. And when people buy like an enterprise EDR license, they expect their vendor to do whatever they can to protect them. And the moment they fail at protecting them, they will be blamed. They'll get all the blame, and they'll be, I don't know, publicly named and shamed and whatever. While the other side of the coin, which is maybe the free products, free AV, and so on, there's no contractual connection, like no direct or immediate connection or link with your vendor. You buy something, and then if you're lucky, then you don't get ransomware or Trojans or stealers or whatever. And if you are unlucky, then you get ransomed, and probably you have no power whatsoever. And I think here what Juan was saying about Gmail, giving you this option, like yeah, sure, that would be amazing to get this option where you actually see who was targeting you, which emails were. But what happens in reality is that all your emails are being analyzed, processed, and analyzed for all sorts of things, and there are statistics, but you don't get anything at all. And the I think the bigger point here in the whole discussion would be that I think that throughout the years, I realized that maybe one of the reasons why everyone was complaining was like, oh, this antivirus product could do that, or could potentially be leveraged or compromised to deploy advanced business telemetry or um, you know tools. I mean, not implants or tools. They could be leveraged to deploy tools. Uh,
And that was an academic conversation. Now it's clear.
What is clear to me now is that everyone was doing that, and the conversation was more along the lines like, on this side of the ocean, everyone's doing that. So it makes no sense that on the other side of the ocean, no one's doing that. They all must be doing that. So that was the argument. Like, in my mind, this is what started the whole discussion, that since we are doing all this shit, the other side must be doing the same shit.
I mean, that's fair. I think that's fair.
Can I
right?
just
Like,
make a point that nobody answered the question I asked?
Well,
is it
okay.
appropriate for Windows Defender to have a Windows Defender plus plus for a subset of people? Is that fair game?
I think it depends entirely what you're talking about with a subset of people, right? Like I understand the indignation of researchers who feel that they shouldn't be monitored any differently by an EDR, and I fight them back on the EDR part of it, right? Like, you're trying to undermine the security of a product, you're breaking the EULA of that product, etc. But I do, and maybe this is hypocrisy, but I do find the Defender, the Microsoft version of it, very upsetting, because I never installed this shit. Moreover, I can't get it off my machine. Like, Kostin and I will talk once every year and a half, and I'm like, dude, how the fuck did you turn off this telemetry collection? How did you, like, I understand the defense approach of Microsoft, but guys, like, these are my samples, or more importantly, these are samples that were given to me under TLP. These are things that I need to protect on behalf of other people.
Now we're getting to the crux of what has been driving my questioning.
I agree, but I think that's where you need to kind of piece apart what we're talking about. There are different remits. It's why I've been talking about for many episodes now, and in other ill-advised rants, I keep talking about how, like, inappropriate it is to think of the ecosystem maintainers as security companies that have security offerings, right? Like, that is the ultimate misalignment of incentives in a way that doesn't get discussed quite the right way. Do I not want them to collect telemetry? No, I think they absolutely should. I want them to leverage it even more than they currently do.
You're cool with them lifting your samples?
No, I'm not. I'm not cool with them lifting my samples. I'm not cool with them, checking my searches and going through my ChatGPT logs and whatever else it is that they're doing. But at the same time, I don't object to it on principle, as far as, like, here's a developer box, here's something that is clearly being used in an attack, and leveraging it. I think
Is there some hypocrisy there a little bit, maybe?
No, I think the problem we have is wanting to look at people again clumped as one big group. When you like we have this human rights mentality to it. And that the thing about human rights when we discuss human rights is the notion is inalienable, non-differentiated rights across an entire species. When we talk about how you handle things with a customer base for Microsoft, it's not that everyone is created equal, everyone needs to be treated the same. There are people who are just users who want to go to a website, watch some porn, play some fucking video games, and then there's people who are there trying to undermine the security of those people, the privacy of those people, the foundational capabilities of that ecosystem. And then there's, us on the side trying to also add to that endeavor. I don't love that we lump when you lump everyone in, which is what Apple does, you just go, everyone deserves the same privacy. Let's just not even look. And you go, great. Now we're all fucked. All of us are hacked, and none of us know what's going on. When you look at the Microsoft side of it and they go, okay, well, we're willing to collect a little more from those people that are doing fucked up shit to the ecosystem, you go, that's great. Can you share? No. Well, can you not take my stuff? No, fuck you.
No.
You're another one of those people. You're like, okay, well, what the fuck are we doing? Like, that's when you go. This is a very selective clustering of who matters and what you do with that intel. And I think we would all be a lot more comfortable if you told me that what they're grabbing is going into being a force multiplier for everyone in the industry that's trying to do the same kind of defense. If Google was lifting stuff, malicious things from Gmail, from safe browsings, from whatever, and piping it all into VT, we would have a very different mentality about it. Google doesn't do that. If Microsoft had their Via sharing thing and anything and everything that they collect that is determined to be suspicious or malicious within a certain boundaries, right? Like only executables, only whatever, it must have hit this signature, it must have hit this threshold, and we're going to put it in Via and everybody gets the sample so everyone can work on it, we would have a very different mentality about it. But they treat it as if it were a proprietary intellectual property business advantage. And that's the part where you go, well, fuck you, because that's not the project here, right? Like that's not what we're supposed to be doing as far as defense goes. That's you turning this into a business and then trying to leverage visibility over my work to improve your offering. That's different.
Yeah.
So
Costin,
now,
even beyond like accusations of hypocrisy, isn't there like a discomfort with who makes that decision internally at one of these companies to go say that guy
no,
should be on the list for special monitoring?
listen, I admit that I was a bit puzzled why Juan was taking the position that he was in the previous episode and at the beginning of this episode, but now
You
it's
see
a
he's
bit more
changing
clear.
slowly.
No, I understand. Finally, now I understand that what he was talking about is the fact that he's outraged by all these abuses and he wants more people to talk about it. Like
I knew
the
it was coming.
deploying of the tools and the implants. This is all outrageous, and it's good that more people are talking about it. It's good that we are aware.
What the
It's
fuck are
good
you guys
that
doing here?
we are now, let's say, switching from I don't know Defender to other operating systems.
Red
And
Star OS.
truth be told, like 6 months ago, I came to the conclusion that it's impossible to do any kind of serious malware analysis, like if you want automated processing of malware samples on Windows. It's impossible.
Wow.
Like doesn't matter how much you disable Defender. Like the moment that you start playing and scanning and processing massive amounts of samples, it just magically turns itself back on. Like it's the end. So I just completely stopped doing any kind of
Do you
processing of
think it's
malware
because it's
samples on
you,
Windows.
or do you think that's behavior for everyone?
Could be me. I don't know. It could be I don't know. But again, maybe it's my IP address. Maybe it's my license, like Windows license. I don't know what it is, but it could be everyone again. But like the conclusion was that yeah, I need to switch everything, and that's what I did. I switched all my processing systems where I run the Java rules, like the automatic analysis of samples that I'm downloading like from open sources. All of that, it no longer happens on Windows because it's impossible. Just
Juan, is
practically,
that
it's impossible.
acceptable though?
Well, I mean, I'm pretty amazed to hear coast and switching, but mostly because I'm like, okay, so what are you using, man? Like, tell me how you're working it.
Linux.
Yeah, but how's that going? Anyways, but that's a different conversation. Look, I think it sounds conspiracy Ryan-esque to say that they're doing it because it's us. I don't think it's specific. They're looking around there with like a list of people. I think when we know how no, Ryan, we know how these systems work. You're looking at a fleet of 300 million computers, and one of them is setting off 5,000 AV signatures a day.
Exactly.
What the fuck is going on that system? Like, that has nothing. I think that
There's nothing nefarious there. You think that
well,
that's
I don't think there's anything nefarious in what selects you into that group of systems.
to
What you
get Defender turned back on magically in the background.
I mean, look, do you really not want it to happen if it's that kind of like if it's a developer box, whatever? Our case is very niche, and I understand that our case is very niche, and I wish that there was some easier ways to like enable some of this stuff. Even think about it this way, right? Like, um, there are big fights between the cloud providers right now. I think Google's been crying about the possibility of having to pay for Windows licenses in order to provide like Windows VMs in cloud offerings, right? Like they're basically saying like, boo-hoo, that's unfair. And we go, well, just pay them for the licenses, right? Like OEM that shit if you want to give that offering. But like you look at it, like nobody provides Windows VMs in their cloud offerings except for Azure, right? Like that's their competitive thing. Um, I would love to see, sort of the kinds of offerings that would make our lives a little easier. Fuck it, man. Like with Windows, I can set that up in a box here in my house. Mac OS, you literally have to go buy Mac hardware and emulate it and stuff. And you're seeing it in the way that like CI/CD pipelines are developed for code signatures for these ARM machines. You see it in the way that like VM offerings go. Like you go look at all of these malware sandbox offerings right now, and you go, do you support Mac? And they kind of like, sort of, right? Like, yeah, but they don't want to because you don't have the same cloud offerings, you don't have the same licensing offerings, and so on. Those are the moments where I say, like, we have a very niche use case. We are not a business by any stretch, not a worthwhile business when it comes to these multi-trillion-dollar companies. We are a cost center and a waste of time and effort. If you just look at it as how do we make money out of security, if instead you were looking at it as how do we keep and maintain a healthy security ecosystem for our platforms, then maybe Apple could go, well, yeah, we don't like Corellium, but we're going to offer you this other thing to like, or we're going to enable this other thing, or here's a type of licensing that will hopefully encourage sandboxing companies to exist. Or Windows can go, yeah, we don't really want, the bad guys fucking with our latest Windows stuff, but we do want you to be able to test. So here's a separate Azure offering. Like, why isn't there more of a concern to enable the security research industry that is genuine? Like, look, we're not exploit devs, right? We're just doing malware analysis. We're just writing SIGs and trying to find cool shit and trying to help you. I think in part it's a business and they're driven by money, but I think in part we've turned security into a business offering inside of this company. So the idea of enabling anyone outside of this company is anathema. And those are the moments where I'm like, can you people just please move on to trying to make money out of AI and forget security as a business? Please.
Hurry up and monetize AI over there.
Go. Just grab your shit and go.
Speaking of AI, could Microsoft leave Notepad alone? I mean, you're going to embed their... Can we switch quickly? A story I saw on 404 Media. Shout out to Joseph Cox for getting a hold of a law enforcement document that described iPhones magically rebooting. iPhones in law enforcement custody magically rebooting. And there was originally a thought that there's like some new proximity update that Apple pushed to thwart some like some forensics. I don't know the purpose of it, but the hypothesis is that Apple introduced a new security feature that tells nearby iPhones to reboot if they've been disconnected from a cellular network at the time. That was the original reporting. And then a day later, we got confirmation that Apple actually added a feature into iOS 18.1 called inactivity reboot, implemented in kernel extension. And the big takeaway is that this new code will reboot the device if it has not been unlocked for a period of time, reverting it to a state which improves the security of iPhones overall. Weird story, because the original reading was that there was some proximity thing, but this if it's only shipping to iPhone 18.1, that kind of debunks that. What is your reading of what's going on here, Costin?
Proximity thing is stupid. Sorry, Costin, go ahead.
No, please.
I mean, the proximity thing was stupid, right? Like that's just like thinking about this way too hard, right? Like,
Correct.
why you don't need the comms part of it.
Yeah, but the cops saw things rebooting and they couldn't figure out why.
Yeah, but it's cops, right? Like they're not. We can't take we can't take their insight on this.
Stop it.
No, I'm dead serious. They're not super technical people. That's why I'll admit this, when it first came out, and like no shade on Joseph Cox, but like, but I do think like the bar for reporting for like the 404 media, same as like the stuff that we used to see from like certain parts of Vice. It's like you're more
people.
You're more willing to report some things that may not be things, and maybe they are, maybe they're not. And in this case, it's like, at first I was like, maybe some cop just fucked something up and they didn't realize it, right? Like the chargers got unplugged at some point. They don't want to admit that like they let the shit fuck up. But no, when you hear that it is actually a feature, like, you know what? You ask Kostin, let Kostin talk about it. I have strong opinions about it, but like, I want to hear what Kostin has to say instead.
Well, let's assume it's this inactivity reboot. Like, what's is that a significant mitigation? And what do you think Apple is up to here?
Well, I think it is a significant mitigation. The only question is whom they are protecting against. So it seems to me they're trying to protect against law enforcement, right?
This is right. We get into the crux of the issues that they're playing a cat and mouse game with law enforcement and celebrating some of these tools.
Which would indicate to me that the law enforcement is maybe abusing things. Like, why would Apple be messing up with the law enforcement? I don't know. But what's important, I think, to mention here is that Apple is not the first company to come up with this idea. Actually, Graphene OS implemented this maybe 3 years ago, something like that. And in my opinion, it's a really nice feature. Now, if Apple could actually implement this suspicion as well, the fact that, if one phone reboots and there's like a bunch of nearby phones which also they're disconnecting from the network, can you send them like a low energy
BLE,
Bluetooth?
some sort of low energy thing? Yeah,
and then reboot them as well. That would be amazing. So if Apple can do that, that would be fantastic. Please do it. By all means.
No, don't encourage this. Like,
I want to encourage it.
I wanna give you a different use case. This is not just fucking up law enforcement.
Mhm.
This is also fucking up iOS security researchers.
How so?
If people were holding on to potentially infected iPhones from victims in the field in order to then wait until they had a mechanism to inspect, because given our previous
citizen lab thing kind of is where you're going, right?
Yeah.
Where it's this Bill Marsek guy, these guys collect old devices and kind of wait for future research that might help them break into it at some point. I mean,
Apple, given our previous conversation, we've already established, right? Inspectability is not an interest of theirs. It's not something they're looking to enable. They're not helping Citizen Lab or anybody else, even though it seems to be the main feeder of 0 days. Then this fucks those people up too, right? Like, you're telling me I was holding on to a phone that I believe got hit by, an advanced actor. This is some, civil society person that presumably should not be getting hit. And now this phone that I'm waiting for a fucking jailbreak to come down. is going to reboot itself and trash that out, you go, okay, well, there goes a whole pipeline of 0-day discovery and implant discovery out the fucking door. And like, those are the, like, this is one where I am not on Apple's side for. If they were giving us inspectability, if there was a way, let's say, to dump an encrypted copy of the memory and save it for posterity or whatever the fuck you want to do, that means that this once in a lifetime moonshot of an opportunity to improve our security is preserved, then yeah, okay, go do what you do and get things off of memory and help stave off law enforcement, which, I mean, look, in the US, maybe we don't, the idea of staving off law enforcement is not entirely kosher or whatever. But look, if we move our shit thinking to I'm in Saudi Arabia and this is happening, you would feel about it differently. So I get it. I appreciate it. However, once again, cool measure for everyone, not amazing when you don't put that little caveat that goes, oh, but we need to make sure we enable the security community so that they can keep feeding us. Like, I don't see Apple caring it like Apple. I think Apple would be happier if Citizen Lab just like fell into the
Disappeared. I
right.
agree
Like,
with you on that.
if Citizen Lab disappeared
They're
tomorrow,
more of an irritant than a help.
yeah, they would be happier. And I think that says everything you need to know about their approach to it. You can't say the most important thing for us is securing this platform. The most important thing for us is being aware. Any 0-day, we're going to patch it. Any whatever, like, we're going to improve, we're going to create. That would mean we want to know where we're falling short. We want to know where we're fucking up so that we can turn this around as quickly as possible and fix it. I am fully on board with that, guys. But that is not what is happening here. You're pulling out these other great mitigations and kind of nudge and winking, going, and along the way, it means these guys can't fuck with us anymore. And you don't care enough to call, like, it's 30 dudes, like 30 people in Canada, right? Like, you can just call them up, be like, hey, we're going to do this other thing, but let's talk about how we can fix your thing. And maybe that's happening, but I don't think it's happening. I don't think Yvonne is calling Bill Marsack and going, hey, Bill, how do I help you? What have you got? Right.
Uh, one of the arguments in this law enforcement needs an iOS backdoor debate is Apple should create a law enforcement a backdoor for law enforcement, was the fact that there are other sources of getting access to things for law enforcement. Remember the San Bernardino thing? That was the debate. It's like, okay, we need to make sure we need to protect this bit of 0-day research because the alternative is a law enforcement backdoor. Here, if this is not targeted at security researchers, I don't think it's targeted at security researchers. I think that's a byproduct of it. But if it's a cat and mouse game with law enforcement and law enforcement tools, there's a little weirdness there to me. That Apple is willing to go down that road, knowing that that's the little checkbox that, in their favor, keeps away law enforcement backdoors. It just feels weird to me.
I think they're inviting the fight further. And if I can be, I know you've typecast me as Mr. America in this situation, but you have to admit that other countries exist and ours can look pretty shitty sometimes. So I don't.
Are you taking off this cloak and throwing it out the window because of the election?
Look, brother, this is not the week that I'm coming here to defend America. Okay, like, this is let's not even. But my point, more importantly, is like Apple isn't defending against the FBI only. They're also defending against the fact that, like, you're going to get the same law enforcement requests from Hungary and Turkey and a variety of other places that have a very different standard of what is appropriate law enforcement. So let's just moot the question altogether. This thing is a fucking vault and you can't have it. Where I actually think all of the conversations we've been having up to this point kind of converge in a neat way is the security research use case is very interesting because the victim, the owner of the phone, has given their permission to have this used in this way for security research. So when we have these conversations about, when you immediately turn this into a conversation about a government backdoor, it gives it too much credence in the sense that, once again, you're lumping everyone into a single category. And you're saying, in a very paternalistic fashion, I'm going to protect all of you from yourselves and from everybody else. And you go, well, but it's my device, right? And I do have different priorities. And maybe my life's mission is, if I get hit with a fucking 0-day because I told the president to go fuck himself, then maybe, I want that to be dissected and for people to be more protected because of it. So I'm going to hand my phone off. I'm going to put it in whatever kind of cold storage Citizen Lab or somebody else has, and hope that in 6 months, when someone jailbreaks 18.1, that we'll be able to recover the implant. We'll be able to recover the 0-day. I'm going to be able to help other people. I don't have that choice, even though it's my fucking phone. And that's the part where I disagree with Chris Rolfe and some of these other folks on Twitter and everything. It's like, I don't want you to degrade the security of iOS. I don't want a backdoor. But if you told me that I could somehow, from a physical port, dump an encrypted memory or whatever, and that you would still need whatever components from Apple's servers and this other thing to decrypt it, fine. But it's there. It's for you guys. We're not harvesting O-days from attacks for our benefit. We're not doing it so that we can resell them. We're doing it to report them to Apple.
Just to round up this, by the way, shout out to Apple for shipping this feature. I actually have iVerify on my phone, and I get a weekly nudge to reboot my phone. If Apple is going to ship this in iOS 18.1, which I believe I've downloaded already, and I get this inactivity reboot, I'm down for it if it's protecting my phone against whatever might be sitting there.
You're never going to be inactive in that way.
But I'm down for this bit of technology. I'm down for these mitigations, and I think Apple should be applauded for playing this game, even though the side effects of security researchers being hurt, or even if the perception of going after law enforcement is in place. Costing correct. I mean, rebooting your iPhone is a big deal, right?
I think it's very important. You said you reboot your phone weekly. I would reboot it daily. I actually reboot my iPhones every day. One reboot a day keeps the implant away. Everybody knows that. So, like you, I'm positive of this feature. I like it. I hope Apple does more. But at the same time, yeah, it would be nice if they also gave legitimate iPhone owners more abilities to inspect them, to dump the memory, find the implant, report it to Apple. Everybody wins.
I don't think it would be nice. I think it's like a fundamental requirement. I don't like this. It's
iPhone is 15 years old. It's a fundamental requirement. It works for Apple. I mean, this obscurity is...
Yeah, but I don't buy my phone for Apple. I buy my phone for me. Apple can go fuck themselves.
Yeah, but you bought your phone knowing fully well that you had no inspectability. Now you expect it?
I'm sorry. Who is this person compared to the appliance conversation we were having last week? Right? It's the same problem. If customers have no expectation of inspectability, look, Apple is a perfectly respectable, awesome...
I can go buy an Android phone. I can't go buy a new Fortinet device. There are alternatives to the iPhone. If you don't like that world, go live in another world. There's an alternative for it.
Don't say that shit. You're making it sound okay. This is a fundamental user right. The same way that people are fighting for the right to repair devices, people should be fighting for the right to inspect devices. Apple happens to be a really respectable, relatively idealistic company that puts their money where their mouth is. But what happens if tomorrow Ivan has a midlife crisis and decides that he wants to just suck up everyone's text messages? You don't know that anything has changed because you can't inspect the phone. You don't know that they can serve you a different firmware upgrade than other people, right? Inspectability, man. You need to have that. You can't tell them that it's okay.
Make your case. I'm just putting the ball on the thing for you to make your case, bro. Don't comment me. Listen, speaking of iPhones, what do we know about this Salt Typhoon situation? Salt Typhoon is this Chinese threat actor that we've heard have broken into Lumen, Verizon, a lot of these big backbone providers. And there's like a daily or more, twice a week droplet of leaks, especially to the Wall Street Journal, around the fact that presidential campaigns, people directly associated with the US presidential campaigns on both sides had their iPhones were surveilled through their iPhones. And then a US federal agency, what did this one called? The Consumer and Finance. Anyway, one of these US agencies actually issuing a directive for employees not to use iPhones for work, business, and referencing that hack. This Salt Typhoon thing, we've talked in the past about FOMO Typhoon, the fact that nobody knows what's going on. I'll come to Mr. America here. What is going on?
So
what do you know about Salt Typhoon? Be honest. I mean, I imagine in the background there's a lot of chatter.
Yeah, look, there's what's going on, and then there's this story, and I want to treat those two things separately, because I actually do not like this story. I don't fully.
Which one? The presidential campaign one or the warning one?
The iPhone, the iOS, so there's Salt Typhoon going into these ISPs, backbone carriers, and getting access. We were told to these like FISA monitoring systems and whatnot, which is when we first. I'm actually kind of glad we're bringing this back up, because when we first discussed it, we said, "Oh no." Huge counterintelligence problem that they can see the selectors of who are who's being monitored. Okay, that was one side, but I do remember we specifically said, well, it's not like they were going in there and putting their own selectors, right? They weren't like using it to monitor people, right? And now the story that we're hearing is different as well. Yeah, and they may have actually used the systems in order to monitor these like politically significant people, which to be fair, in that episode we discussed the Athens affair. That's exactly, now we're right back to the like pretty similar situation to the Athens affair. I'm gonna go in and use your surveillance systems against your own political class, and sort of monitor. Fascinating. Now, the part where you don't necessarily take me with you is the iOS infection side of things, and the like this person who I can't remember what company it was, like some person who sells supposed software to protect iPhones says iPhones may be very hacked. I don't like that. Like that
Poor
point,
reporting, right?
I at that point I'm not following. I'm not going with you, because
Well, let me go up the chain a little bit. How much of this Wall Street Journal reporting do we believe? And how much of it do we dismiss as like just leaks and people heard something from someone and kind of leaked something? Or do you think this is very deliberate, sharply placed stories?
I think at the beginning it was. I think when we first started to hear about Salt Typhoon, it did seem like, someone's watching like a 5 alarm fire and thought that other people should know about it because things are not going well. And up till that point, I'm like, okay, well, suit up. What do we got to do? The follow-on reporting now, where we're talking about the iOS stuff, like now we're getting into the realm of like accepting speculation with obvious biases as truth. Like the other part of like, what the fuck does the Consumer Whatever Protection Agency know about iPhones? And like, what the fuck do they know? It's just somebody going, oh, stuff's happening. And then I read the story in the Wall Street Journal, and now you guys can't use your phones. You're like, all right, I'm not going to take that as an authoritative bit of reporting about anything. But on the iPhone side of things, it doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense. Like if what you're telling me is that, okay, this Typhoon breaks into these systems. It now has access to these surveillance systems. It now has access to, presumably, you're saying they have some access on the wire to these phones, and then they can use that to pop these iPhones. Like having access on the wire alone doesn't make you capable of popping iPhones. So that's not it in and of itself. So what you're saying is they're leveraging the capability that they get through being in these ISPs in order to infect these iPhones with a toolkit and exploits that they already have. Why would they need to go through that? Like you're telling me that it seems like it's overcomplicating things in a way that only makes sense to the dude that's out there selling software that supposedly verifies iPhones, right?
Something
Like,
about Salt Typhoon seems different, though. It feels different around some of the public reporting. What makes Salt Typhoon such a significant one over Vault Typhoon or whatever the other Flux Typhoons and all the other APTs, as a matter of fact? This specific one keeps getting front page Wall Street Journal treatment. It's kind of, I know there's some sexiness to saying Donald Trump's iPhone was hacked or like Kamala Harris's campaign was hacked, but like it feels like this is some significant finding, but we're not sure what or why.
I think that this is a more clear sense of we're super fucked. And like uh we're admiring just how badly we're getting screwed by these guys right now. Like, look, the whole milieu of Chinese espionage, as much as I make fun of Chinese APTs and whatever, the Chinese are doing phenomenally. They're
You've said in the last episode that they're kicking our ass. Like,
they are
what is your evidence for this?
they're well, Salt Typhoon.
Typhoons?
Yeah, the well, I mean, I hate that we use these names, but like they have been cleaning up for the past couple of years, as far as I can tell, and I am not at all a Chinese APT expert by any stretch of the imagination. I could rattle off 5 or 6 names of amazing friends of ours who should be the ones having this conversation, and I hope to make them proud and not just fuck this whole thing up. But essentially, what's been happening with Chinese APTs over the past maybe 2, 3, 4 years is that they've started to engineer towards our blind spots in a way that's almost created an industry of support mechanisms in China for things that are built to take advantage of our blind spots. The most clear example of that is all the research you get out of Lumen and Danny Adamitis' team, um, about these
Soho router botnet
the
type.
Soho
Yeah.
router botnets, and then you start to hear from Mandiant about these orb networks. What everybody's not subtly hinting at is now having networks of popped devices mixed with leased private, bulletproof hosted cloud servers across a variety of different providers. It's the new cloud hopper. Like, you guys remember the cloud hopper report from BAE and PwC? It was amazing work by, Adrian Nish's team back in the day and Chris McConkey's team. And they talked about how I want to say it was APT 10, Kosin, correct me if
Then
I'm
it
wrong.
was, yeah.
APT10 had been popping MSSPs and using those MSSPs to hit the downstream customers. Think about what that means from a SIGINT perspective. Like the NSA, GCHQ, whomever are not gonna see what is happening because like APT10, which used to be tracked so well, suddenly vanishes. And you go, well, I guess APT10 is not doing anything anymore, right? And you go, no, they have just found a way to do it in a way that you're legally bound from seeing. They are hitting these American companies, Western companies, and then using that company's access to tunnel into their downstream customers. That was fascinating at the time, and I should have been a huge red flag for Gov and for others. What we're seeing now is they don't even need MSSPs. Now, what they're doing for the command and control side, for all of that, is I'm going to hack a bunch of residential Soho routers in your country.
That
I'm
are
going
end
to
of
use
life that will never get fixed, right?
They will never get fixed. You have no jurisdiction. There's no way, like no one's going to play ball with you. We're going to use that as a covert communications channel, as a non-attribution network that all of our APT activity will come out of. So on any given day, the Chinese are going to rear their head out of a residential proxy down the street from you in Virginia. And that's what's hitting the Pentagon today. And tomorrow it's a different one in Boston. And that's what's hitting the Pentagon today. And I've been hinting not subtly at the distress that I'm hearing from different governments saying, this isn't just happening in America, this is happening in all these different countries, and we don't know what the fuck to do. So what you're not seeing behind that is the Chinese not only found like a big vulnerability and sort of institutional, bureaucratized vulnerability in Western institutions, but they found it and then decided to create a market and an industry to support that use case. There are companies in China that are creating those networks and maintaining those networks for the Chinese, for the MSS, PLA, MPS, whomever, to exploit continually. And we're not adapting in any way. It's why you're calling me Mr. America. It's why I'm out here being like, we need to figure out a way where our people can take the gloves off and somehow see more and somehow do more, because the restrictions we're placing on Western intelligence are being exploited purposefully by the Chinese.
There's nothing wrong with being Mr. America, bro.
mean,
Don't view it as something negative.
just not this
Relax,
week.
relax,
Not this
relax.
week. No,
Costin,
Let's,
how is
uh,
this
let's-
Salt Typhoon and Chinese as an apex actor that is the best of the best that's kicking our ass playing in Europe? I mean, do you guys have the same heightened sense of awareness about the Chinese threat actor?
Maybe not the same level, and I guess the whole story is much bigger in the United States because of the elections and the targets that Salt Typhoon was going after. We know specifically J.D. Vance, or maybe his campaign was targeted, and he was between the victims. I think he went on the record, Joe Rogan, saying that. Well, that's a very cool name, and if I was a target, that's amazing. That's awesome. I have nothing to hide. Like whatever they're stealing, I don't care. And I was thinking, it's not the best name out there, but whatever. What I think here is that it's unrealistic to think that the Chinese do not have the ability to remotely target iPhones that have iMessage enabled, FaceTime enabled, WhatsApp, no lockdown mode, and to assume that the Chinese do not have that ability is a bit unrealistic. I think they do have that capability, and maybe they're just saving it for the best of the targets. And what we have here, I think it's an interesting case. So they're saying that one of these phones that showed the anomalies uh, was actually at the same time a target for Salt Typhoon. And don't forget the fact that these are essentially magnets of threats. The iPhones may have been very well targeted by
Everybody.
whoever, like
Yeah.
someone else, like not necessarily Salt Typhoon. It could be just, again, one of these magnet of threats. At the same time, it's super unrealistic to assume that the Chinese do not have the zero-day chains. I mean, like the $20 million zero-day chain. I think it's unrealistic to assume they don't have it.
We're willing to drop Odays on Uyghur news sites like 4 years ago. Like that prompted what we call like the most callous response ever from any of these companies. But like they were willing to host Android and iOS Odays on open Uyghur news sites. You think that they don't have exploit chains? Like
They must have.
they have to have them. I think the only part of this that bothers me in the reporting is how much credence is being given to somebody like, used car salesman says used cars are great, right? Like you go that that's
You
not
see,
it.
one of the immediate questions we have, and I was discussing with Ryan before, was that do we know if anyone who was a target of triangulation had iVerify installed and iVerify said anything? Like that's I
How
think a
would
very
it?
interesting question.
How would
Uh,
it?
iVerify
uh,
is selling inspectability.
No, it's not. It's
I'm
selling
kidding.
reminders, bro.
let's not forget who created iVerify and their relation to what is referred to as Orb Zero in
Oi,
our
oi, oi.
circles.
Conspiracy ghosting.
Speaking of
Conspiracy.
orb circles, can we pivot quickly to this GoblinRAT backdoor that was documented by Ross Telecom? Ross Telecom has an MDR research team called Solar Forays published a document on GoblinRAT, a very sophisticated APT found in Russian networks. Speaking of kicking ass, this reads very much like another one of those, hey, Five Eyes are after us. Costin, you got a chance to read GoblinRAT, the backdoor. Any samples, any IOCs? What can you tell us about this one?
So I was keeping an eye for this report because a friend of mine said that the report is gonna drop yesterday. So I was like refreshing the website.
Why?
Which, by
Why
the
were you
way,
so excited about it? What did your friend tell you?
You
because
not?
a friend said that this is like a super rare thingy, and that they checked with some friends, and nobody has ever seen this thing anywhere else. So it's like a super rare thingy, reasonably sophisticated, no boss style communications, port knocking, so fully passive backdoor, found in very sensitive places. So this has to be something big. Maybe not like the top of the top, but like Dutch, or below, somewhere there. So
Don't talk down to the Dutch, man. The Dutch are at the top.
above, right? Like the
Yeah.
above orb 0, there's orb
There,
-1, the Dutch.
and that's the Dutch, man.
So unfortunately, there's no samples of this thingy anywhere. I was checking on VirusTotal. I put all the hashes from that report into my robot. It's now on VT, so we'll get a notification if one of them appear. I did notice, by the way, I also checked the with the Kaspersky Open Tip that there are some hashes in there which seem to be legit. But as far as I know, nobody has ever seen any of these samples anywhere.
So after your friend told you to refresh and read the report, was it everything you expected and more?
It was exactly
should we
what
pay
he was
attention to
saying.
it?
It doesn't have, let's say, the feeling that this is the top of the notch. Like, it's not the best of the best, but it's like right below it. It's difficult to say who might be leveraging something like that. I think the rarity, so the scarcity, and the targets are what make this GoblinRAT interesting. And the fact there's no clear attribution clues of any kind, uh, this makes it like a very interesting thingy. And what I also was thinking about is, uh, typically when you investigate cases like that, there's never just one malware. There's usually like multiple kinds of malware. And the only maybe remotely potentially connected case in my mind is the Signiverse hack. If you remember that, the Signiverse hack, Signiverse was like a huge mobile clearing data house in the United States that they just casually announced around 2021 that they were hacked for 5 years. And I was able to get my hands on a report with some IOCs and malware samples, and judging by what was in there, man, this, I would say, maybe it like remotely resembles what the Signiverse hack was all about. Who
Damn,
might
man.
be behind the Signiverse? I have no idea.
Some hot findings, man. Like that's you've been keeping that one close to the chest.
It's in my blog of like the top 10 unattributed APT mysteries that I published some time ago. So the Signiverse hack is one of the remaining, remaining unattributed mysteries in the blog. It would be nice if more people were looking, but I have a feeling there's no desire to investigate that one. Like you can typically say there's a lot of desire to investigate some things, and there's no desire to investigate other things.
And GoblinRAT falls into that
And
category, you think?
GoblinRAT falls into the category of things which
Juan,
resemble
why
the
aren't you
Signiverse hack.
investigating GoblinRAT?
Fuck, I am, man. I'm
I'm kidding.
interested. It doesn't help that we don't have any samples. So I actually thought that was funny in the report. Like they're like, we hope other people will help, and we're like, guys, can you just
Share
upload
the
the samples
samples.
then? Like we'll be happy to like.
By the way, I heard I wanted a quick feedback from Ivan to our episode last week, and he was posited that there's a reason for not releasing samples, specifically because there might be some characteristics in there that tells the threat actor which specific piece of malware was found. There's a little bit of an excuse there. Just throwing that out there. Shout out to Ivan.
If you're describing the whole fucking thing, I don't think there's a whole lot of doubt. Like we're telling them about their own thing. They can recognize it. But
all right, we're running out of time, and I want to pivot to this our regular edition of the magic money disappearing. In all seriousness, Bitcoin is at an all-time high, and just yesterday, I think, or yesterday or the day before, we had this big news story out of Toronto that the president and CEO of this financial firm, WonderFi, was kidnapped, and $1 million ransom was actually paid for his release. I bring that up because I've been tracking this GitHub portal that describes physical Bitcoin attacks, what they call meatspace attacks, and it feels like as crypto explodes, and we're heading into the new era of crypto, that there's going to be a lot of these things. Costin, like, what the hell is this? You're our Magic Money
Well,
correspondent. Like, is
I
this
I
is this the
have
new normal?
I'm like the magic money correspondent without magic money.
Yeah, you
Or
better say that. You
the
better
kind
hurry
of
and say you have none of that.
No
the
sponsors here.
the
We've
kind
no
of
magic money.
the magic money that I have are essentially worth nothing. The meme coins and all that, also known like collectively as shit coins, if you want. But I wanted to say that I do have a friend who is actually running a VPN service, and he just launched a token. And I did invest $100 in his token, so I do have some
Full
magic
disclosure.
money.
Please don't get kidnapped over some magic token,
One
please.
$100, yeah.
But is this
Ah.
mid-space, is this kind of like in real life attacks something that crypto folks already have at top of mind? I mean, the people who are deep into that world?
I think well, there's a huge, let's say, huge attractiveness, let's say, to cyber criminals and typical like real life world criminals towards people who have the magic money, because it's very easy to steal them. Like you just shove them into a car, like you beat them with the wrench, and you ask for the pin for their phone where they keep all the money or some of the money. So everything is like pretty easy, if you ask me. Now, yes, the Bitcoin is at like an all times high. Probably people expect it to continue growing. I think Trump said that he will establish like a Bitcoin Federal Reserve, and so on and so on. So, like, sky's the limit, moon's the limit, like how they say in this field. Um, I would say that this kind of physical attacks that we have seen in Romania as well, like a couple of times. So it's pretty much all over the world. Indicate that criminals are willing and they have the knowledge. They understand the value of these things, and they have the knowledge, and they're willing to go after people who have Bitcoin, so-called Bitcoin millionaires. So if you're one of them, like think twice before advertising your assets. Like, I think one example here who probably attracts a lot of attention is Vitalik Buterin, the founder of Ethereum, who is probably a billionaire or like something like that. To me, he would be a huge target for these bad people. So, yeah.
How do you own?
That's it.
How do you own Bitcoin and not have it be someone put a wrench to your neck and get your phone PIN code? Is it possible to own Bitcoin and let the adversary know that it's magically somewhere else?
I heard people who are doing these hardware wallets, and where the seed is actually engraved on steel plates, and then they break it in like 3 or 4 or 5 separate pieces, and they bury all those things like in different locations, maybe not even in the same
Perfect way
country.
to lose $20 billion.
Yeah, right.
It is.
Yeah.
It is like the moment, like somebody builds a house on top of that, or like then your magic money
Why are
is
you
all gone.
shaking your head? This world confuses you?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't confuse me on the technical side of it. It confuses me in the appeal. I think it's the ultimate trick that like libertarians have played on humanity, that you could somehow return to an idea of like a gold standard or whatever in cryptographic form, and that somehow you are insulated from all of the things we had to develop in order to protect normal money, right? Like there's a reason that like you were scared to have your carriage robbed back in the day, and that people would try to hold up, you had to have private police accompanying carriages and trains so that they wouldn't be robbed, and you would have people robbing banks, and you would have people, being held at gunpoint to give up their valuables. And I think only, privileged first world libertarians can imagine that keeping a mattress full of cash doesn't make your home a target for robbery, right? Like that's something that anyone who has ever lived outside of the United States and Western Europe understands very fucking well, right? Like that's the problem. If you don't trust banks and you don't trust other institutions and their insurers and so on, that's fine. But that means that it's entirely on you to somehow protect something that everybody else wants. It's the same mentality that gives people the idea of like, well, what if we just buy an island and make our own sovereign nation? And we're like, bro, have you ever heard about pirates and shit? Like, what the fuck are you planning? How are you? Like, forget the part where you somehow figure out electricity and running water and all that stuff, but also like we're back to like the Hobbesian mentality of survival of the strongest, and there's no respect for whatever the fuck it is you think your magic money somehow entitles you to. In a different sense, Kosin, this just reminds me of like the OPSEC training for security researchers like 10 years ago, right? We expected, I think a lot of folks expected to have a conversation about like what software should we use? How do we secure our laptop? And it's like, bro, this is not a technological issue. This is entirely a matter of like what signals are you sending? What do people know about you? What do they think you're worth devoting resources to? Because unless you're spending that magic money on having an army of trustworthy people around you, I don't know what you think is protecting you from somebody stealing. If you can access it, other people can, force you to give them access to it. That's just the nature of life.
We can't do our weekly Magic Money segment without talking about the North Koreans. There's two new reports out from last week to this week. The first one from Seong-soo, who is our North Korean expert living in South Korea, working for Zscaler now, right, Costin?
Correct.
Put out a new report on two subgroups within this North Korean umbrella, Wage Mole and Contagious Interview, which ties in the entire ecosystem of fake North Korean IT workers stealing crypto, moving crypto around, evading sanctions. He's got some pretty neat charts there. Anything stood out there for you, Costin? Why should the folks pay attention closely to what Seong-soo is saying?
I think North Korea is such a complex state, and you actually see that they're starting to play a bigger role on the like the world scene, if you want. There's now North Korean soldiers fighting in Ukraine. There's North Korean shells being shipped to Russia, used to bombard Ukrainian cities. So it feels like North Korea is playing a more and more important role pretty much everywhere, not just in one place. And what you're seeing here is, I think, one of the tentacles which form like a big, a big octopus with many different operations and many different capabilities. So the moment that you maybe, let's say, you start getting touched by one of these tentacles. So if your company, let's say, is targeted by be it Lazarus, Blue Norov, Kimsuki, whatever, I think you need to pay attention. So I would pay attention, especially if you're playing in the cryptocurrency spaces, into these outsourcing services, like the case of the contagious interview story. If you're like a company who's active in any of those fields, I would pay attention to the stories, and I would pay attention to what, especially what Seong-soo is saying about them. And of course, the same about the Sentinel-1 blog.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Costin mentioned Blue Norov. Tom Hegel and guys from your team, Juan, put out a new report on some fake crypto news lures using some PDF with some backdoors and then but specifically targeting macOS and macOS users. Not entirely new. Jamef has documented some of it before. What is the significance of this documentation? And when you say they're targeting Macs, this is just in addition to everything else. This is not like a focused approach on targeting Mac users, right?
Well, it's built for the malware is built for Mac, right? Like, so at the end of the day, you're gonna have that, and in a way, not to make all of this discussions about privilege relevant in this particular thing, but like I've always been curious as to why we don't spend more time on like Mac malware, considering that owning a Mac immediately designates you as a high net worth individual by most, global standards. Like owning a Mac or an iPhone really puts you in a a pretty rarefied class as far as the planet goes, as far as how much money you have available to buy hardware. So with things like this, I'm not entirely surprised that that's the targeting. It's what we've seen before. And shout out to Phil Stokes. I mean, I know Raphael and Tom worked on this together, but Phil has been giving these guys the chase for years now, just like finding or elaborating on these different pieces of malware like Rust Bucket and all these other things that like Blue Noroff has been putting out.
Whose phone
And
is buzzing?
not mine.
Costin,
But
throw that phone off the table, please.
I don't have
Whoever's
phones,
phone
man.
is on the table, throw it on the table.
It's not
man,
me.
you're just now you're hearing ghost phones. It's an old age thing. Man. It's
Aren't you hearing it? Sorry. Go
I know
ahead.
I heard
No,
it, but it wasn't me.
what I was gonna say is while we're on the subject of sharing samples, Phil actually Phil and Tom Raphael uploaded the second stage sample to VT for folks that are interested in that kind of research. With these particular components, it can be so hard, as we saw in like 3CX and Smooth Operator and stuff. It can be so hard to get access to the second and third stages. So I'm proud to see the labs guys doing their thing to further everybody else's research. So go pull some samples and fuck these guys' days up.
All right, that's all I got, guys. We're at an hour and a half, which is just at the right sweet spot. Any quick shout outs, Costin?
Shout outs to our good friend Seong-Soo for making life harder for these guys for North Korea.
Absolutely.
And I think shout outs to all the people who are working with Salt Typhoon, like trying to get them out of all these relic network equipment, like legacy network equipment that nobody knows how to update anymore. I think it's pretty awesome that they are doing this job. So
Juanito, when are you
that's
off
it.
to Argentina for Echo Party?
Next week. I will be out all of next week. We will be recording from Argentina, internet permitting. Hope to see our good friend Fede over there. It's his birthday coming up, as well as a pretty special anniversary for Echo Party, which, for those of you that have not been, is a absolutely phenomenal conference. It's basically like DEF CON Latin America with all of our amazing Argentinian friends. They're phenomenal food and they're great hosts. And for those of you who don't know, Ryan actually keynoted Echo Party a couple of years, maybe a year ago, 2 years ago.
Last year.
Jesus fucking Christ. Last year, and did a phenomenal job. And
This is not the time to suck up to Ryan.
No, it's not the time to suck up to Ryan. Ryan had a keynote precisely about some of these concerns we've been discussing about Microsoft that I think folks should probably rewatch. So you won't toot your own horn, but I'll throw you a bone here.
Happy birthday to Fetty. Enjoy the food, enjoy the red wine, and we'll talk to you from Argentina next week. Costin, paka.
Ciao, bye.
Bye.